be valid. And then here you would have to put type. Okay, insert it again, and then we can do the same delete from returning star. And you can see here, notice that we're inserting and deleting here. Here is 100 and 101. This is 102 and 103. It did not reuse those old IDs, right? It's just continuing to increment. So if you delete something, that unique identifier is gone forever. I don't know about you, but like I feel like weird about deleting something and it's like never going to come back. I don't know why I get like nostalgic for that. I don't know if nostalgia is the right word for it. Attached? I don't know. I probably should ask a therapist about that. Like the object permanence of unique identifiers in the universe. I feel bad for GUIDs that never are going to exist again. It's just therapy with Brian now. Anyway, any questions? Anyone else share my sadness? Nope. Okay, I'm weird. So the delete froms are really similar to updates. We just don't have a set in there, right? All you're doing is just you're identifying where you're deleting from. You're giving it some where clause to say like delete these things, so you can kind of pick the things that you delete, and then you can return them if you're interested in seeing what you deleted. Otherwise, it'll just show you the number of delete to, right? Cool. Okay. Well, let's talk about select. I think I decided to go kind of out of order. Most people learn select first, and then they learn how these other things that I've been teaching you. But I wanted to show you how to construct data and model data before we started looking at data, right? So now we're actually going to start looking at the data. The most classic of them all is select star from whatever table you're looking at. And this is going to give you literally everything back in the table. If you had 10,000 columns in your table, this will give you back 10,000 rows. You can see my computer can't even show them all at once. But that is what this did, right? And so you can see everything that we've inserted in here. You can see it does skip some numbers here and there because that's stuff that we removed or deleted it or something like that. But here we are, and we have a bunch of various different ingredients. So select, you're telling it what you want to, you're going to pull things out of the database. Select does not update anything. All it does is pull data out. It just reads, right? Star is everything. Give me all of the columns from, you're asking from what table you want it to come from, and you're telling it you want it from in the ingredients table. So that is it. What if I only need to see the title and the type? So notice there's no ID here and there's no image. I'm going to recommend that in general for your code, right? I'm talking about for like your JavaScript or Python or Ruby applications, you should specify what you want and don't just do star. Star is lazy. And it makes it more intentional that later when you come back to read your code that you know I was asking for these specific things. You're being very intentional and kind of self-documenting in your code that you're asking for specific things rather than just give me everything. On a side benefit, it is slightly smaller payloads going back and forth between your application and your database. It's a little less processing of what's going in and out. Not really the point. It's so menial and small for the most part that you don't really care. The bigger advantage is that you're being more intentional with your code. So if my JavaScript application just needs a list of types and titles but does not need the images, don't do the star, just do select title and type from ingredients. I'm asking that as your potential future coworker to help me out there. Okay. Questions? Make sense? All right. What if I only want 10 things instead of everything, which is generally the case as well? If you have, I mean, can you imagine trying to do like select star from Facebook's user table or something like that? It would crash all the servers, right? Literally billions of rows. So add yourself a little limit there, and that'll give you back however many things that you asked for. So I asked for 10 things, so this will give me back only 10 things, right? You can see there are 10 rows. It's a little bit better than a billion rows, right? So whenever you're doing selects, unless you really know that there's not going to be very many things, or unless you're intentionally trying to get everything out of a database, you are basically always going to have a limit. Okay, so I have the first 10 things. What if I want the next 10 things? Well, offset 10, right? So that now gives me the next 10 things. And if I want the next things, offset 20, and then so on and so forth. Eventually, it'll get to the last one. You can see we only have 1 in this. So even though I said limit 10, it's like I don't have 10 to give you, right? So you just get 1. Now, what is a problem with this? Let's say, like this is called pagination, right? I'm paging through my data. What happens if I delete, hold on. So a user queries my page like this, right? And they're seeing all of these ingredients. And then let's say we have a problem and we decide to delete black pepper. Right? So I delete from database black pepper. They then ask for the second thing. All of these rows have now shifted up. So what happens? Pineapple is actually going to come into here, right? Because there's 1 less row here, because I asked for, and then the offset is precluding that, right? So basically, the user is never ever going to see pineapple, which is kind of weird, right? Now, if we're talking about ingredients, it's probably not the end of the world that they skipped an ingredient, right? I don't know, actually, it might be. But I would imagine in most cases it's probably okay. So this is the dangers of offset. And there's kind of a dual danger as well. The first of all is that if you're paging through it, you might miss things because things are being inserted and deleted and things like that. So, and actually a better way of doing this sort of pagination is to use these IDs, right? So rather than say offset 20, I could actually just give it a where ID is greater than 32. Or let's say, let's do it after 23. Right, now if I delete something or something like that, we're anchoring on a row in the table rather than anchoring on some sort of offset. Does that make sense? So if you're paging through data in your particular service, this is a better way. It's also way more performant, because think about it. If you ask for, give me 100 rows and give me an offset of 1,000, your database has to go organize it. It has to count 1,000, and then it gives you the next 100, right? If you keep doing that over and over and over again, it gets kind of expensive. Whereas if you're just saying, hey, give me everything bigger than this ID, it can just go right to that ID and then give you everything after that. Ends up being a lot more performant. So it's an optimization. You don't always have to do it. For our application that we do today, feel free to use offset. I just want you to know that that's a way better way of paging through data. Yeah.
So with Postgres QL databases, people tend to use just numeric IDs versus like Mongo, it's this big like hash.
Yeah, it's a good question. SQL databases always in general, they're just numbers. And these numbers might get to be, 100 million or a billion or something like that. Like, I imagine your checking account ID, like with your bank, is probably their primary key in their Oracle database, right? That's probably where they get that, right? Whereas something like Mongo or some other databases, they give you like objects. It's not really a concept here of that sort of thing in SQL. It's going to be a number.
It's more like a UUID or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. There's probably other ways of doing it, but it's almost always just an integer identifier. Yeah, Dustin.
When do you use a UUID as the ID?
When?
When would you use a UUID?
I can't think of a reason in SQL. I've never done it. I'm probably someone can correct me, but you just always do it this way. This is the SQL-y way of doing it. There are instances where you don't need an integer primary key, and I will show you that once we get into joins. Basically, you'll end up having some sort of like other thing be a primary key, and then you will not have a use for an incrementing ID. But I can't think of a reason why I would like use a hash or something like that. That wouldn't make any sense to me. The ID would make a lot more sense. And the reason why I say that is like, you want to join things between tables and things like that. It's way easier to deal with integers just mentally. And SQL is built for it, so there's no reason not to. That's a good question. Maybe stated a little bit differently from a Mongo perspective. Mongo, you really never want to do joins. And this is not a Mongo course, so we're not going to get too much into it, but you don't have two collections and then you try and join them together. If you're doing that, you're doing Mongo wrong for the most part. It's possible, it's expensive. SQL, you're going to do joins everywhere because SQL it's a relational database. What was it? RDBMS, Relational Database Management System. RDBMS is what people call these style of databases. It's literally built into the name that these are supposed to be relational, which means those keys are supposed to line up, which means it makes sense for those to be integer numbers. Okay. So we did limit, we did offset, and I kind of hinted at the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is where. So we can give it clauses where like I only want to select specific kinds of things. So if I say select ID, title, wow, that was mangled, title, type, from ingredients, where, and I can say where type equals fruit. Oh, I put an extra comma there. Don't put the extra comma. This where is just basically like, hey, make sure that this where clause holds true, right? You're giving it some sort of conditional to filter on. There's a bunch of stuff you can do. I showed you, you can do like where, you can do numbers, right? Where numbers greater than, you can put greater than or equal. We can also say like, let's say we want to, select everything that's not a fruit. This little symbol right there where it's just angle brackets put together means not equal. So now I'm getting everything that's not a fruit, vegetables, meats, others, those kinds of things. I can do things like select star from ingredients, where ID is less than or equal to 10. You can also put and, right? Or. We'll do and right now. ID is greater than 20, and then limit 10, right? So this is going to give you everything. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. Rather, I wanted to do this. Or did I do that the wrong way? I did it the wrong way, didn't I? From ingredients where ID is greater than or equal to 10 or less than or equal to 12. not like that. There we go. So this will now limit everything that I get between these numbers, right? So that's what these ends. Both these have to hold true. You can also put or in here. Right. So now this is giving me anything that's outside of those limits. Anyway, I had these all right in here. I don't know about you, but I always have to think about the alligator and like which one's greater than or equal to, and I have to like check 5 times. But I got it right here. There we go. So here I'm asking for where the ID is outside of the range of 10 to 20, right? Inclusive of those, right? So you can see this goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and then it skips everything 10 to 20 because that's what this OR does here. Cool. And then, so there's a bunch of other like conditions you can do there. We're gonna like look at fuzzy text search and some other things like that here in a little bit. But just know that like it's not just like equals or less than or equals. There are others as well. Last one I wanted to show you here is select star from ingredients, where let's say limit 10 here for just a second. By default, these are generally going to be ordered by ID because that's going to be generally the order that they were inserted into. But just know, according to the SQL spec, it's not required to give you back anything in any order, right? Generally, it's going to give it back to you in the order of insertion, but that's actually not required, and you probably shouldn't rely on it in your application. If you care about order, you need to provide a order by. So in this case, order by ID would get you that same thing, but let's say you wanted it in descending order. So now it's 33, 32, 31, right? And it's giving you back in reverse order. That's what that desc means, descending, right? Just so you know, you can put ask in there, ascending, but that's actually just the default. It's just optional if that's important to you to be specific. But you can also put order by title in there, right? So now it's going to give it back to you in alphabetical order. Likewise, order by title descending, it'll give you back watermelon, tomato, sugar, strawberry in that order as well. In other words, if you care about order, you should provide order, because while Postgres is generally consistent, it doesn't have to be. Okay, questions about order by? Yeah, Dustin.
Do you have any preference between the CLI or some kind of SQL client when you're working with an SQL database?
That's a good question. Do I prefer using the command line, or do I use something like, the other option would be pgadmin, which we will see in the second half of the course. I almost always use PSQL because I just always have. It's what I learned on, it's what I continue doing. It's not a good reason, but it's just my reason. There's other people that grew up using things like pgadmin or PHP myadmin for like MySQL. Also very common, and I think JetBrains has like a really good SQL client as well. I can't remember what it's called. There's like VS Code or VS extensions for querying databases that are like visual. I like writing queries and seeing the results, so this is what I do. But sometimes it's really useful to take that data and like make graphs out of it and stuff like that, and things like a client, some sort of GUI can help with that. Obviously, this doesn't help you with graphs, right? So you can also generate like CSVs and put that in Excel, and then Excel can generate graphs for you. I've done that a bunch, but I'm just used to doing it this way. Yeah.
A couple other suggestions from the chat are Data Grip, Postico, Table Plus as well.
Cool. Yeah. Nothing I've used before, but I believe the chat. Other questions? All right.
Just lunch is here, so
Okay.
we can break whenever it feels good from your flow.
Yeah, this is as good a time as any. So we're going to take 70 minutes, right? It's generally the...
Yeah, 70 minutes for lunch. Is that? Yep.
Yep. So we'll come back at, that'll be like 1:10 Central Time, and then we will keep going with functions.